So let me tell you this. When I talk to clients, I work a lot in the automotive industry, but also in the industrial sector in Europe, but also in the US. To be really honest with you, there is also some sort of frustration around this whole notion of Industry 4.0. And I would like to talk about, today about overcoming that frustration and overcoming what we call pilot purgatory. Because what we see in many, many client situations is that while many clients, actually almost all of them, are investing into Industry 4.0, they are trying to do pilots, they are implementing, new technologies, virtual reality, predictive maintenance, and so on. Many of them actually fail to move beyond pilot stage. So they are stuck in that pilot stage, and they are actually not able to scale that up, integrate that with the core business, and they have their fancy, cool little pilot applications, but after some time, the excitement vanishes because it's really hard to move, beyond that pilot stage. And that is, I would say, a situation that they face also with a lot of startup companies, obviously. But the good news and the good thing is there are success cases where we see actually that this scale up and this large scale monetization of the new technologies are possible. And I would like to talk today a little bit about what does it take to overcome pilot purgatory. And this is also based on the research we do together with our clients. So we run a digital manufacturing survey with 700 executives every year in the major industrial hubs, from Asia over Europe to the US. And it's always quite interesting to see what the common themes are. And this is what I'm going to talk about. What I would like to do also is to make this session quite interactive, so to speak. So whenever you have a question, please raise it directly, because I think, if we can create a lot of interaction in the room and also some questions, then I think we can make most of our time here together. All right, so then So there are actually 3 questions I would like to base my presentation on. Question number 1 is, really how optimistic are you about value from Industry 4.0? Yeah? Is there value in it? Is it not? Is it overhyped? What is it really? What's your take on that? So question number 1. Question number 2, and that's always a great question, I think, to ask, is the question about timing. Because there is a problem if you are the first one and you are too early in the market, and actually technology and the rest of the world is not ready for a certain adoption. But of course, likewise, it's a problem if you come too late, because the digital environment is an environment where we say, winner takes most, if not winner takes it all solution. And if you are advancing, then it's always quite hard to catch up. And the third question is, what I mentioned earlier, how to actually get out of this pilot purgatory, how we call it. Yeah. Okay, of course, I also have my 4th industrial revolution slide. It's not that one, it's actually the next one. But I think it's always fascinating to think about, if we would apply a thinking where, what has happened in the last 20 years, or maybe even less, 15 years in the B2C world, and with us as customers or as people, how we became connected, what that mean if actually 50 billion machines get connected, then we see that there is a tremendous potential where we are still actually only tapping on the surface. So as we speak today, there are worldwide approximately 8.4 billion devices connected. So that's, I would say, more than I would have expected, to be quite frank with you. But what we also see is that, the data that comes back from these connected devices are in many cases not utilized in the best possible way. So there is still, I would say, a lot of potential here. And here it comes, the Industry 4.0 slide. And I'm not going to drain that slide, but clearly we are here on in a new exciting age, and there are a lot of opportunities, I would say, for every one of us as companies, but also as individuals to drive forward. Because also, and that is also no big news, I mean, the pace of innovation is accelerating, right? So between the first telephone and the cell phone, it took us 116 years, right? Between the first cell phone and the first smartphone, it only took 10 years. And between the first smartphone and, let's say, the first smartwatch, it only took us like 5 years, yeah? So you can see, you know, the innovation cycles, they are becoming shorter and shorter, and therefore, you know, there is a lot of buzz and excitement overall. And to put some number behind it, so we have done a research, and I think this is also what Kent mentioned, what we did with our research arm, the McKinsey Global Institute, and we have tried to estimate the impact of IoT on different settings. And what you can see here is that by far the largest impact is actually in the industrial sector, so in factories and work sites, yeah? Overall, almost 1/3 of the total impact. And as Kent also has mentioned, you know, this value can only be unlocked if you have a what we call interconnectiveness, which means that you have a, I would say, a way of connecting between the different settings and to make sure that you overcome the silos that also Haman was talking about earlier. So now back to our questions. First question, how optimistic are you about the value that comes from Industry 4.0? Now, let's consider the technology innovations that are happening actually right now. And I would like to highlight 3 of them. The first one is data and connectivity. You know, every minute, as we speak, yeah, every minute 300 hours of YouTube videos are uploaded every minute. And, you know, we are connected in a way that we have never been before, and that is, I would say, the foundation for, you know, every application we see in the industrial context. We need to have connected devices, connected machines, and basically make use of the data that is really there. The second one is intelligence. Here I would say what is interesting in that sense is that the concepts and the algorithms for advanced analytics and even artificial intelligence, they are not new. They are there, I would say, already for 100 years. Yes, they have become better, more sophisticated, but the big difference here is that due to the higher processing power and due to the fact that, you know, number one is in place, that we have more and more data available, we are much better able to train these algorithms to do things they haven't been able to do before, yeah? So, you know, imagine this deep learning experiment that Google did, where they tried to identify pictures with cats on it. Yeah, this would have never been possible if there wouldn't have been an internet and people that upload, you know, videos of cats all the time, right? So therefore, this is a second thing that has changed here. And the third trend is in particular relevant for the manufacturing industry. That is really flexible automation and the potential we get actually from advanced robotic solution, from AGVs, so autonomous guided vehicles running across the factories. That is also, I would say, not yet fully exploited. And if you combine these 3 things, data and connectivity, driving intelligent algorithms that then in return drive a more flexible automation, you can come up with very, very exciting use cases that you are able to drive. So that is also an interesting question. You know, what percentage of humankind's data was created since the Stone Age and until 2016? And you know, the interesting fact here is that that's only 10%. So 10% of all the data we have today was created between the Stone Age and 2016, and 90% of all data we have available around the world was created in the last 2 years. Yeah, so there you can see that, you know, the world is really changing, and it's very fascinating. already 12% of the global trade is done electronically. You might say that is still a fairly small number, but if you consider the value that stands behind it, that's actually fairly big. And also, if we look at the growth rates, it's ever increasing. And I talked already about the 8.4 billion connected devices that we have across the world. So the second thing is around intelligence. If you were amongst the first users of Google Now or Siri or even Amazon Alexa, you might have been a little bit frustrated with the quality that this speech recognition assistant had. And if you haven't tried it out for quite some months, I would really encourage you to do it again, because you can see a step change improvement in the quality of these technologies, I would say, every month, right? So as of today, you know, one back. Actually, 95% of the words you dictate, the questions you ask Siri and so on, are actually accurately understood by the tool. And that wasn't the case a few years ago. So, I mean, 2010 was actually only 28%, or let's say 28% errors, and that went down dramatically. And the interesting thing is, and now coming back to the winner takes it all or winner takes most paradigm, if you consider, for instance, automotive OEMs, they have in the past tried to create their own speech recognition system in the car, where you then say, okay, turn on the heating or turn on the navigation. And due to the fact that they hadn't that much data to train the algorithms that you know, Apple has at hand or that Google has at hand, they haven't evolved at the same pace as, you know, the digital players have improved that. And this is, I would say, a good example of how, you know, big data combined with intelligent algorithms can really have a massive impact here. Yeah, and that is same is true for speech as well as image recognition. Yeah. So I also talked a little bit about, you know, putting data into action. We have 8.4 billion devices, and what we have looked at with one client was actually, you know, out of the data you have at hand overall, how much of this data are you actually using in order to train your algorithms? And the interesting part here is, if we say, you know, 100% of the data captured, let's say you have an oil rig and you have certain sensors and you try to capture this data, only 40% of the data is stored. And out of that 40% of data that is stored on the oil rig, actually only 1% is streamed onshore. And as you can see, that even that 1% is further reduced downstream and used for KPIs, for analytical insights, and then finally for preventive maintenance. So you really have a slippage of data in this whole process, which makes it at the moment still for some companies quite hard to harness, you know, the data treasure that they have. So one of the important questions, you know, we need to tackle is, how can we actually improve the conversion rates moving from one step to the other? Or if it's, you know, the same conversion rate, how can we make sure that we are actually storing the right data and using the right data for our algorithms? Yeah? And that is not only true for the oil rig, that is the same for the automotive industry, where you say you have connected cars that produce terabytes of data every day. Clearly, you cannot stream all of that data to the cloud. You need to have a good mechanism of selecting the right data points that you want to drive, and then also to make use of that. Any questions, comments, or remarks from anyone at that point in time? Feel free to speak up or comment or object. Okay, so the next thing, and that's also, I would say, relevant in that context, is the question around automation. We have looked at I think it was 1,500 activities across many different professions, and wanted to understand what are the activities that we would be able to automate with existing technology. So where you could say, okay, technology is actually ready, we could automate that task today, and how many percent would we expect to be automatable in the next 3 years. And what is very interesting is that as of today, we found out that more than half of all activities, both in white collar as well in blue collar, can actually be automated. And in particular, where you have predictable physical work, I mean, that's clear, and we are using already robots for many of these things, absolutely. But what is even more interesting for me is white collar work, back office work. Every activity that is rule-based and repetitive could potentially be automated. Yeah. So and I'm not talking about fancy or advanced analytic algorithms. I'm talking about robotics process automation technology, where you just script the different variants, and if you are able to streamline your processes, you are able to automate these processes. And I have also seen a lot of buzz around that topic in the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months. We have also seen that at many clients that they have started to pilot and implement automation technology. But again, what we found out was there is a lot of, pilot purgatory, so people stuck at the pilot stage also in automation efforts. And the reason for that is that while we start to automate the processes and we try to move from let's say, from a manual work to an automated work, actually we are not changing the governance structure, we are not changing the organization. And that leads to a situation that you are actually only on an incremental process change level, and you are not able to scale that up to across the situation because across the organization, because processes are different in different countries, and in Austria the controlling process looks different than the controlling process in Germany, and so on, and people are separated, they are sitting across the whole world, and actually with the automation you cannot drive any of the efficiencies. So therefore, in that sense, for automation, one of the key things that we have learned is that you need to first start with a view about how do you actually want to run your organization in the digital age, and that means that actually the way you organize yourself, the way departments are structured, has to look very different from the way it is being done today. So to give you a few examples, typically we would be looking at a much more centralized organization in the back office functions, so that you are able to reallocate resources that are freed up due to automation. We are looking at the world where we need much more process standardization, because if you have standardized processes, you are able to avoid variations, and this then also drives scale up of automation. And we are looking at the world where we need to enable people to use technology in a smart way. What do I mean with this? Coming back to the controlling example, we always then ask ourselves, how would actually Google or how would Apple, run controlling if they would build up a new company? And what these technology players do is that they very much self-enable their employees. So, there are not armadas of accountants or controllers or what have you, people out there, but actually everyone is creating their reports and their controlling instruments themselves, leveraging technology. And that is the mindset that is needed here. What we can also see, and we run this digital manufacturing survey every year, is that there, I would say, is there was a huge increase in excitement between 16 and 17, and between 17 and 18, it somehow leveled off, and that is due to this whole, situation of many companies having challenges in scaling up their pilot efforts and really monetizing it, and in particular the ones that started earlier, North America, Europe, and Japan, see that much more than the emerging economies such as China, India, and others. We can also see if we look at the mergers and acquisition activities in the tech space that is going up tremendously as well. So we had 4 billion of funding in the past 12 months, and typically 400 deals per year, so around 100 per quarter, which also tells us two things. Number one, the topic of Industry 4.0 is really, still a very relevant one, and there is a lot of things going on. And number two, companies realize that they actually need to open up their ecosystem and partner or acquire smaller specialized technology players in order to make their use cases really work. Okay. So now, coming back to our questions. Second question, what about the timing? Too early, too late, or just the right timing? And here I would like to take a use case-centered view and talk a little bit about what others are doing in order to also demonstrate that actually the timing is right to start now. What you can see here on the left-hand side is that these are the three technologies that are driving industrial automation or Industry 4.0 or digital manufacturing, or however you want to call it. And on the right-hand side, you have the use cases that basically make use of those technologies. So on the connectivity side, it's very much around, IoT-based performance management. So what we have done with one client is we have implemented a digital shop floor management, where they used to have on the shop floor only their charts with the pies and so on, and they used it in every meeting, and we digitalized that whole experience, also integrating analytics to understand when a machine would actually break down, and therefore optimizing OEE, so equipment efficiency and utilization of the machines. Augmented reality is another thing that I would say is quite interesting. I am still, at least with the current technology, a little bit skeptical if scale up is already possible, because I haven't seen many situations where this is really driving impact at scale yet. However, that I would say is something that will come over the next 3 to 5 years when the technologies improve and they get better, because clearly the use cases are there, and I would say it's an exciting technology. So on the intelligence side, one of the classical use cases that many people talk about are clearly predictive forecasting and predictive maintenance. And I also have to say there is a lot of value in there as well. To give you one example, so one of our clients, machinery clients, actually wanted to understand how they can identify in the end-of-line test machines that are likely to break in the warranty period. So they are fine once they leave the production, but actually, they want to understand, is there an increased risk that these machines will fail in the first 2 years of operation? Because that obviously involves a lot of cost of replacing them, and it's within the warranty. And that company then partnered with a startup, with a Canadian-based startup, that helped them to develop an algorithm that looks at the vibration pattern. So they do a vibration test at the end of the production, where they compare, which machines have actually failed in the field in the first 2 years and which have been okay. And then they compare these two clusters and then they try to derive commonalities and common patterns of the ones that will fail. And what they found out was actually there is a certain pattern, a certain vibration pattern that is leading to a gear tooth fracture in the field in the first 2 years of operation. And that saved them a lot of money because then they could say, okay, actually we need to rework that piece, we need to put it back into production, and they could improve this whole assembly and end-of-line test. And on the flexible automation side, I would say here there is also a lot of activity going on, and in particular on the cobot side, so robots that interact with humans. This is something where we see a lot of activities and a lot of use cases that companies are working on. It's not working. Yeah, I skipped that one. So I want to give you one additional case example. What I also find extremely fascinating is how a consumer electronics manufacturer in China has actually managed to do this scale up. So when they started in the pilot stage, they were on the left-hand side. So they captured 1 billion data points per day, which resembled, I would say, only 1% of the total data that they actually would need to gather to drive adoption at scale. And basically, the frequency and the accessibility of this data was also, measured only in hours or days, depending on the data source. And what they did, they managed to actually scale that up to 10 billion data points per day, and then to being able to analyze actually 100% of the decisions that need to be taken here. And the accessibility was driven from hours down to minutes and even seconds in some cases. So, and then, based on that, they developed personalized dashboards for the plant managers, but also for the people then sitting, at the headquarters, where they could measure throughput in real time and throughput of the assembly in real time. And they also implemented, predictive alerting. So in that case here, they find out that actually one tester is drifting out of control. The test pattern is actually triggering an alert, and that tester then can be taken offline, and the issue can actually be corrected before the yield and the assembly is being impacted. So the interesting thing about that use case is, the impact it actually generated. So, 87% of the headcount was automated and could be, reallocated to other more value-adding tasks. Output increased by factor 2, and the quality issues were actually reduced by half. Yeah. So while there are these, I would say, lighthouse examples, there are also many other companies, industrial players that are actually stuck in pilot purgatory. So according to our survey, 78% of all the surveyed companies have started to run pilots, but only 22% have actually started to scale that up. And nobody moved from a scale-up within their company into a real ecosystem integration mode. And also, if you look at the time that is being spent on these pilots, you can see that almost 1/3 remains in pilot stage for more than 2 years. And therefore, we believe, the key question at the moment that we need to tackle is not so much, what are fancy use cases that I could do, but more, how can those, on average, 8 use cases that are typically being piloted in big industrial companies, how can we identify those that we really want to scale up, and how does this scale up really work? Which brings us back to our third question here. What we also are able to derive from the data, and of course also from the discussions, is what actually distinguishes the laggards from the leaders, and we define laggards and leaders based on the financial performance of these companies. So the top 20% of companies, what do they do different than the bottom 20% of companies? So, and there are three themes I would talk about, and the first one is the most important one, and that is around the organization. Yeah? And we already heard in our previous presentations that the way of doing business needs to change, and that is holding back many companies of achieving impact at scale. You need to break the boundaries of departments, you need to collaborate in a new and better way, and most importantly, and that is something I keep hearing again and again and again, is, you know, you need to have support from the top, senior executive support. And with senior executive support, I mean CEO. I mean, really the head of the company needs to stand behind it. And, you know, from, I would say, anecdotal evidence of the clients I work with, whenever that was the case and wherever, you know, the head of the company has a clear vision where he wants to go, then we are also able to do these reallocations and to really adopt the organization to the new normal and drive impact at scale. If that is not the case and use cases are developed bottom up, then it's much harder to actually cut through the noise and to get that scale up. Second one, also related to organization, is the organizational alignment. So what do I mean by that? You have one common goal, and the whole organization is actually aligned towards that goal and walks in the same direction. What we see quite often is that there are, you know, one initiative here, one initiative there, something else working here, you know, the partners, the people are working with are not the same ones. Sometimes, you know, people work with different players in the ecosystem that are somewhat competing, and I would say the whole concept is not aligned internally. And then the third one is, what is also very important is that we need to walk business backward, not technology forward. There are so many exciting technologies that are out there that, of course, all of us tend to get carried away by what technology can do, but we would actually encourage everyone to turn it around and to first of all say, okay, where are the pockets of value? Where is the big business case? What is really moving the needle? And then select the appropriate technologies that support that vision and that support that use cases. It sounds trivial, but I can tell you in many cases it's the other way around. What we also see is that you know, in terms of the IoT use cases that are being implemented, the more things you do parallel, the better the financial impact is, although at a certain point in time, it levels off. So this means, you know, on average, industrial companies have around 8 use cases in place that they drive. And what we see is if you are able to do even more, then you have a larger basket of eggs in order to determine which ones are the right ones that I want to push forward and that I want to scale. Of course, there are some of them that are moving beyond 30, then it can also be too much of a good thing, obviously. But we would nevertheless encourage you to experiment, to try out different things with a strong CEO or CXO backing in order to, you know, avoid getting stuck here in pilot purgatory. The second thing is about the ecosystem, and we've heard a lot about this one. I mean, this is also something that is very close to my heart because I've seen many cases that, you know, bringing in a small player, bringing in a digital pure play, a startup into an established setting of an industrial company can really act as a game changer. And it's also confirmed by the data. So from the leaders, so the 20% that are breaking out of the pack, actually, you can see that they are 167% more likely choosing technology that is more open and that allows developing this ecosystem, because it's really, really important. And you cannot do everything on your own, and the times where you say, okay, I want to keep everything internally, those times are long over. What you instead need to do is you need to understand what are the critical control points within your technology stack that you want to own yourself, and what are the things that are maybe also important, but where you are not differentiating and where you actually need to partner. And you can also see, 40% less likely to do everything in-house, and 175% more likely to externalize the software and app development. So really make use of that fantastic ecosystem around you, and many potential ecosystem partners are here today, so you can start today by further building out your ecosystem. The other thing is this whole notion of breaking down the silos, and here the important point here is that we should try to create cross-functional teams. We should try to work in squads, swarms, tribes, however you want to call it, with the big goal of saying, it's not a functional effort, it's a cross-functional effort. So this means if I want to implement a Industry 4.0 use case on predictive maintenance, you need to assemble a sprint team that consists of people from operations. You need a product owner from the business, which is typically sitting probably in sales or maybe even after sales. You need maybe somebody from the engineering department. You need IT involved, and you need an external ecosystem partner to maybe help you with critical technology. And all of these different pieces of the puzzle are put together, and they need to act almost as a startup within your company in order to be successful. Functional efforts will not work anymore. And also, I would encourage you to be bold, to also test out technology that is maybe not at a maturity stage where you say large-scale adoption is possible. Coming back to the augmented reality and virtual reality example, yes, I say the technology is probably not ready for large-scale adoption yet, but if you don't start to pilot and to experiment already today, it will be fairly hard to catch up later. So as a summary, there are actually 6 key success factors to escape pilot purgatory. The first one, and I would start on the right-hand side, is the organization. So you need to drive that from the top, and you need to, and that was something we haven't talked about so much yet, you also need to make sure that you build up the capabilities you need to have here, especially technology capabilities in-house. Second thing, middle one, technology setup. What we also see is that people that fail to move from pilot to scale-up stage typically haven't figured out how their pilots fit into their back-end system infrastructure. So this means when you develop your technology vision, it's actually quite important to say, how does that fit with my back-end system landscape? And am I actually able in this brownfield environment to scale that up, or do I need to either change my pilot approach or change my use cases, or start working on the back end to make that fit together? And obviously, it's also around ecosystems. And the third one is, be value backward, not technology forward. We talked about that. And of course, the strategic vision, including a business case and a change story, are also very, very important. So if you only take away 3 things, please remember this. Number 1, organizational barriers are holding us back, much more than technology. It's not the technology that is stopping us from doing it, it's actually the organization. Number 2, transformation is really top-down. we need this, C-level CEO commitment in order to make that work. And number 3, there is no silver bullet. No IoT use case is a silver bullet as such. Therefore, try out different things. Start pilot activities in many respects and identify those pilots that you really want to scale. And starting matters more than actually spending too much time on identifying the optimal use case. Okay. Thank you very much.